X-Winder, the original desktop filament winder. This video details the assembly of the 2-axis upgrade model 2X-34. This is a picture and listing of all the parts that ship with the 2X-34 upgrade. So first we'll start with the right mandrel drive post. You're looking at an exploded view from the assembly drawings of the right mandrel drive post. First we are attaching the 10-inch long mandrel post to the 3-inch long short post with the side plates and 4 double T-nuts. Keep the bolts a bit loose at this point as we've got a lot of other items to attach. Next we're sliding in the motor mount plate to the 3-inch short post with a double T-nut. Again, we're keeping the bolts loose at this point. Now slide the mandrel drive belt over the mandrel post, then place a single T-nut in the slot of the mandrel post and insert the 2.5-inch bolt through the motor mount plate so that the 2.5-inch bolt engages the single T-nut in the post slot. Leave this bolt loose for now, but make sure the threads are engaged. Here is the mandrel drive post from the smaller X-Winder, and we'll be reusing all these parts as shown here with the 2-axis mandrel parts on the left and the 4-axis parts on the right. Next, we're going to mount the mandrel shaft drive gear, which includes 3 large gear plates, the thin gear end plates, the small circular swash plate, and the 2-screw clamping shaft collar. Make sure you're using the correct shaft collar. It's basically 2 C-shaped clamping parts with 2 screws. Next, we'll slide the half-inch outer diameter shaft through the mandrel post bronze bearings, and at this point we just slide on a nylon washer, the swash plate, and the 2-screw clamping shaft collar. Go ahead and tighten down the 2-screw clamping shaft collar with the provided hex key against the swash plate. The bronze bearing, the nylon washer, and the swash plate and the shaft collar should be pressed against the mandrel post firmly enough to allow free rotation of the mandrel shaft. Make sure that the 2-screw clamping shaft collar is now tightened down in place. Next, we prepare the mandrel drive gear from the 3 gear plates, the 2 thin end plates, and the 4 1 3/4-inch bolts. Next, we slide this drive gear onto the shaft and make sure that the 4 bolts enter the swash plate and tighten down the 4 bolts. When tightening down the bolts, go around in a circular fashion from bolt to bolt and incrementally tighten them down slowly so that the drive gear is centered about the mandrel axis. Now, mount the mandrel motor to the motor plate with the 4 5mm button head bolts that came out of the old mandrel motor. Next, slide on the 24-tooth gear on the mandrel motor shaft and position it so that it is in the same plane so that the belt is not misaligned as the larger drive gear. Then tighten down the 2 set screws on the gear to affix it to the motor shaft. Now, loop the drive belt over both gears and let the motor plate slide down the 3-inch post so that the belt becomes firmly tightened, but not so tight that the rotation is impeded. Then, tighten down the 2 bolts at the bottom of the plate to secure the plate to the 3-inch post. Also tighten down the 2.5-inch bolt. There should be a small amount of clearance between this bolt and the drive belt as shown. Now, loosely screw in the 3 concealed end nuts in the bottom of the motor posts. Next, you'll need to drill a 1/4-inch hole that's a 7mm diameter, or you can go slightly more than that, as shown 2.5 inches from the end of the front mandrel post, as shown. You should already have holes at 1/2 inch and 1.5 inches from your original winder setup. Now slide the mandrel post in the front long bar and tighten everything down. To make this a bit easier, I try and hang the winder frame over the edge of the table to get access to the bottom side of the corner plate. That's basically it for the assembly of the mandrel drive post. In the future, if you need more mandrel torque, you can add a second mandrel motor as shown with the purchase of our dual mandrel motor upgrade. For the other mandrel post, all you need to do is swap out the shorter mandrel post with the provided longer 10-inch mandrel post. That concludes the mandrel post assembly, and next we'll go to work on the carriage motor post. Here's a schematic of the carriage motor post as shown in the assembly diagrams with several isometric views from the CAD model. Here's a close-up of the CAD model showing the completed assembly. First, we'll attach the 3-inch motor post to the L-shaped corner base plate with two 1/4-20 half-inch long button head bolts. Go ahead and tighten these two bolts down. Next, we've installed two double T-nuts and 6 single T-nuts to the corner base plate as shown. You should be reusing all the hardware from your original winder for this purpose. Then, we slide in the 3-inch wide, 7-inch long motor support bar onto the two double T-nuts and install the two rubber feet as shown. Then we apply the adhesive-backed rubber sheet onto the 3-inch wide, 7-inch long motor support bar. Now we slide the whole motor assembly onto the frame crossbar and tighten it down. Now we're ready to install the new NEMA 34 motor with the parts shown. So we attach the motor mount plate to the front of the motor with the 5mm button head bolts from the original motor, and also install the double T-nut on the mount plate. Now the motor mount plate slides down onto the motor post and is held in by the double T-nut. Also, on the bottom of the motor mount plate, half-inch bolts are inserted to secure the plate to the motor mount bar, and the right angle brace is secured to the plate and to the frame crossbar as shown. Now insert the 24-tooth motor gear to the motor shaft and position the gear so that it's in line with the carriage attach point. Once in line, tighten down the two set screws in the motor gear and install the carriage drive belt as shown. That completes the carriage motor post installation. Now we can move on to the other carriage post. Here is an assembly schematic of the carriage post as shown in the exploded assembly diagrams. This is a perspective view of the CAD model of the completed assembly, and note that some of the hardware is included but also optionally installed at your discretion. There is not a lot to do here except transfer the 10-tooth gear and shaft from the original winder to the new upgraded winder and exchange the corner base plate. Here is the hardware we will reuse from the original winder. Like the motor post, the first thing to do is to attach the 3-inch carriage post. This 3-inch carriage post has a 5/8" bore clear through for the rotating shaft. Go ahead and attach this 3-inch carriage post to the corner base plate as shown, and insert the bronze bearing, shaft, and 10-tooth gear into the carriage post. Now, outfit the base plate with 6 single T-nuts and slide the base plate onto the frame crossbar and tighten down. Now it gets a little tricky because you need to attach the long bars to the newly installed corner base plate. What I've found useful is to remove the 4 single T-nuts from the base plate and slide them into the slots of the long bars. Now, let the long bars rest down on the base plate, and from the bottom of the long bars, move the T-nuts into positions by sliding them along the slots. Now, with the frame slightly hanging over the table, you can insert the 1/2-inch long bolts into the bottom of the base plate and find the threads of the single T-nuts to tighten them down. Once that's done, we're finished with the carriage post and we can move on to the carriage itself. So here is the carriage itself as depicted in the exploded view of the assembly diagrams. So we start with the 2-axis carriage from the original winder and remove the top crossbars with the logo plates and install the rear top plate bar and this front end piece. Then we install the 12-inch long fixed bar as shown, but make sure that before installing you locate 2 single T-nuts in the upward facing slot on the fixed bar. Now add the 2 connector plates to the fixed bar and include additional T-nuts to support the 13-inch sliding bar, which is the delivery head arm that can be repositioned fore and aft. Now install one of the delivery head options like this one that supports the nylon eyelet. We will go ahead and replace the logo plates from the original winder. Lastly, on the carriage, we need to exchange the carriage belt clamp on the wing bar so that the belt is aligned with the carriage motor drive gear as shown. So that's basically it for the 2-axis carriage upgrade, but there are several important items you'll need to do before returning the winder to operation. You need to rewire the Mandrel axis controller box as shown so that the mandrel rotates in the correct direction. Open the Mandrel Axis controller box and swap the green and white wires as shown. If you have moved the carriage limit switch during your rebuild process, you need to remeasure the carriage offset distance as shown and input that offset distance into the designer software in the settings page. Now that you've upgraded, you also need to go back through the Executor Software Setup Wizard by first clicking on the gear icon button on the Executor Software user interface. Then in step 3 of the wizard, select the new winder type and then complete the wizard by clicking Next and saving the new settings. Next, make sure you plug in the new larger power supply which outputs 24 volts and 5 amps. And it can accept wall socket voltage from 100 to 240 volts AC, so it can be used in most countries around the world. Number 4. Also in the setup wizard, increase the new amperage supplied to the motors by increasing the voltage to the recommended level of 4 to 5 amps. After these final steps, your winder should be ready to go for its first winding session in the new configuration.